Britain entered World War II with the largest air force in Europe. Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, Mosquitoes, legends forged in the Battle of Britain and the bomber offensive over Germany. But the Royal Air Force flew far more than just those famous names. This is every British aircraft of World War II, starting with fighters, Supermarine Spitfire, the icon. This single-seat interceptor became the symbol of British resistance during the darkest days of 1940. It was fast, maneuverable, and constantly upgraded throughout the war with more powerful engines and heavier armament. Pilots loved it. The elliptical wings gave it superb handling at high altitude, and it could turn inside almost anything the Luftwaffe threw at it. The problem is production never quite matched demand in the early war. By 1945, over 20,000 SHU had been built in dozens of variants, serving on every front from the Arctic to the Pacific. It works. Hawker Hurricane, often overshadowed by the Spitfire, but this was the real workhorse of the Battle of Britain. It shot down more German aircraft than all other defenses combined in 1940. The Hurricane was tougher, easier to repair, and could operate from rough grass fields. Its thick wing could carry 8 machine guns or 4 20mm cannons, making it devastating against bombers. Music, later versions became ground attack specialists in North Africa and Burma, armed with rockets and bombs. Slower than the Spitfire, sure, but it did the job when Britain needed it most. Moving on to heavy fighters and night fighters, Bristol Beaufighter, a brutal twin-engine beast originally designed as a heavy fighter. It was fast for its size and packed an incredible punch with 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns in the nose. The RAF quickly realized it was perfect for night fighting, fitted it with radar, and used it to hunt German bombers over Britain. It also became a feared anti-shipping strike aircraft, attacking convoys off Norway and in the Mediterranean. Crews called it the Whispering Death in the Pacific. Dangerous, de Havilland Mosquito, built almost entirely of wood to save strategic materials. This twin-engine fighter bomber was one of the fastest aircraft of the entire war. It could outrun most German fighters, so it often didn't need defensive armament. The RAF used it for everything: high-speed bombing, photo reconnaissance, night fighting, pathfinding for heavy bombers, and precision strikes. The Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, Amiens prison, the Mosquito hit targets other bombers couldn't touch. Legitimately capable, continuing with bombers. Avro Lancaster, the heavy bomber that carried the war to Germany. 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, a massive bomb bay that could fit everything from incendiaries to the 22,000-pound Grand Slam earthquake bomb. The Lancaster flew over 156,000 sorties, dropped 686 12 tons of bombs, and suffered horrific losses, 573 aircrew killed. It was the backbone of Bomber Command's nighttime strategic campaign. The problem is the defensive armament was weak, and German night fighters tore them apart until escort fighters arrived, but it could absorb tremendous damage and still bring its crew home. It works. Handley Page Halifax, the second heavy bomber of Bomber Command. It entered service alongside the Lancaster, but never quite matched its bomb load or altitude performance. The Halifax was solid, reliable, and served in more roles than just bombing: glider towing, maritime patrol, electronic warfare, agent insertion into occupied Europe. It carried paratroopers on D-Day and resupplied resistance fighters. Not as glamorous as the Lancaster, but absolutely essential. Vickers Wellington, known affectionately as the Wimpy, this twin-engine medium bomber used a unique geodetic airframe, a lattice structure of aluminum that made it incredibly tough. Wellingtons took hits that would destroy other bombers and kept flying. Early in the war, it was the primary night bomber over Germany. Later, it served in North Africa, the Mediterranean, and as a maritime patrol aircraft hunting U-boats. Outclassed by 1943, but it did the job when Britain stood alone. Bristol Blenheim, a light bomber that was already obsolete when the war started. It was fast for a bomber in 1939, but by 1940, German fighters massacred it in daylight raids. The RAF switched it to night bombing and maritime patrol, where it was less vulnerable. Blenheims also served as long-range fighters in North Africa, attacking Axis convoys. It struggled, but it was what Britain had in the desperate early years. Armstrong, Whitworth, Whitley, another early heavy bomber, though heavy is generous. It was underpowered and slow. The Whitley was the first British bomber to attack Germany and Italy in World War II, but losses were heavy. By 1942, it was relegated to training, glider towing, and maritime patrol. It did its part in the darkest days, then stepped aside for better designs. Now, this is the Short Stirling, Britain's first four-engine heavy bomber. It had a short wingspan to fit into existing hangars, which limited its altitude. The Stirling couldn't climb above 17,000 feet, making it an easy target for German flak and fighters. Despite its size, it carried less than the Lancaster. Bomber Command pulled it from the main offensive by 1943, but it served well as a glider tug and transport. Outclassed, moving on to maritime patrol and reconnaissance. Short Sunderland, the famous flying boat. This four-engine giant patrolled the Atlantic, hunting U-boats and escorting convoys. It was heavily armed, so heavily that German pilots called it the Flying Porcupine and avoided it. The Sunderland could stay airborne for over 13 hours, making it perfect for long-range patrols. It also rescued downed aircrew from the sea. The problem is, flying boats were vulnerable on the water and needed sheltered bases. But for maritime patrol, it was unmatched. Consolidated Catalina. Actually American-built, but the RAF operated hundreds under Lend-Lease. This twin-engine flying boat was slower and less armed than the Sunderland, but it had phenomenal range. Catalina spotted the Bismarck, hunted U-boats, and rescued hundreds of aircrew, essential for Atlantic operations. Continuing with transport and liaison, Douglas Dakota C-47. Another American design, but critical to British operations. The Dakota dropped paratroopers on D-Day, resupplied the airborne forces at Arnhem, and flew supplies over the Himalayas to China. Reliable, rugged, and could operate from terrible airstrips. It works. Avro Anson. A light twin-engine aircraft, originally designed for maritime reconnaissance. By the time the war started, it was too slow and vulnerable for frontline combat. The RAF converted it into a multi-engine trainer, and it became the standard aircraft for teaching bomber crews. Over 11,000 were built, a museum piece in combat, but essential for training. And finally, we have training and utility aircraft. De Havilland Tiger Moth, the iconic biplane trainer. Every RAF pilot learned to fly in a Tiger Moth or something similar, simple, forgiving, and cheap to operate. It also served in communications, liaison, and even anti-submarine patrols early in the war. Not a combat aircraft, but it built the pilots who won the war. Miles Magister, a low-wing monoplane trainer that introduced student pilots to modern aircraft handling. Faster and more complex than the Tiger Moth, it bridged the gap between basic training and operational fighters. Thousands were built, and it served throughout the war in training roles. The Royal Air Force flew over 100 different aircraft types during World War II. From frontline fighters to obsolete trainers pressed into desperate service. Some were legends, some were stopgaps, but together they carried Britain from the edge of defeat to victory. Which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for the next video.